The noon sun hung low and heavy over the quiet western town, turning every plank of the train platform into gold. Dust rose in lazy swirls, curling around boots and skirts as the departing train's whistle faded into the horizon. All that remained on the platform was a single woman, standing still, her hands gripping the handle of a scuffed brown suitcase. Her name was Evelyn Grace, 22, small-boned but proud, her presence both fragile and unyielding. Beneath her hat brim, strands of white hair shimmered like morning frost. The light found her and refused to let go. Townsfolk passing by slowed, their gazes sticking to her hair with the same curiosity reserved for things whispered about but never understood. A boy tugged at his mother's dress and pointed. "Mama, look, her hair's white as snow." The mother turned sharply, pulling the child close. "Don't stare, now." Evelyn heard it all. She'd learned long ago that silence could be armor. She adjusted the brim of her hat lower, and took a slow breath that stung her lungs with dust and shame. Her dress, a pale blue prairie gown, threadbare but neatly pressed, fluttered at her ankles. She had come west chasing the promise of work and anonymity, yet the same cruelty followed her across miles of land and memory. Back east, she'd been engaged once. The son of a wealthy merchant had admired her quiet manners, her soft eyes, her voice that trembled like a hymn when she spoke. But on the morning sunlight caught her uncovered hair for the first time, his face had changed. He'd called her a curse in a trembling whisper, his mother clutching her pearls as if sin itself stood in their parlor. By sundown, the engagement ring had been returned. She'd left with her pride and little else. Now she stood among strangers who saw only oddness. The station innkeeper, a stern woman with red hands and a crooked smile, met her inquiry for a room with a brisk shake of the head. "We're full tonight, dear," she said, even though Evelyn could see 2 unclaimed keys hanging behind her. The rejection stung, not for what it meant, but for how familiar it was. She stepped outside, the sun already dipping behind the far ridge. The air smelled faintly of horses and dust. Around her, the town bustled with the evening rhythm of closing shutters and distant laughter. No one met her eyes. She walked toward the road, unsure where it might lead, her boots crunching over gravel, her heart beating out the steady rhythm of endurance. At the far end of the street, leaning against the hitching post, stood a man. His hat shadowed his face, but the light caught the edge of his jaw, a firm line softened by thought. He was broad-shouldered, weathered by work, his clothes carrying the faded scent of sun and leather. He'd been watching her for some time, though not with the judgment she expected. His gaze held something quieter, something that looked like understanding. He straightened, brushing dust from his sleeves, and approached with unhurried steps. "Train leave without you, miss?" His voice was low, steady, like the hum of wind through open fields. Evelyn glanced up, wary but too tired to pretend. "Seems it left everything behind," she said softly. He nodded, taking in the exhaustion in her eyes, the loneliness that clung to her like evening fog. "Where you headed?" "I haven't decided yet. Most folks come here with somewhere to be. I'm not most folks." That brought the faintest smile to his lips, the kind that vanished as soon as it came. "Reed Ranch is a few miles out. I've got a spare room. Not much, but it's quiet, and nobody out there's much for talk." Her breath caught. "You don't even know me." "Don't need to," he replied. "You look like you could use a place that don't ask questions." His name, she would later learn, was Silas Reed, a 30-year-old rancher whose life had grown too still after loss hollowed it out. He didn't speak of it, not then. He only stood, patient as the land itself, offering something most men had long forgotten how to give, grace without price. For a long moment Evelyn said nothing. The air between them shimmered with heat and uncertainty. Behind her, the town lights flickered to life one by one. Ahead of her, the open plains stretched like a promise she could almost believe in. She lifted her suitcase. "If you don't mind the company of someone who doesn't talk much," she said quietly, "then I'll accept." He tipped his hat. Then let's get you home. They rode in near silence, the wagon creaking under the soft rhythm of hoof. The world around them turned bronze and quiet. Mesquite trees reached out like black lace against the dying light. Occasionally, Silas stole a glance her way, how she held herself straight despite the fatigue, how her pale hair glowed even in shadow. Something in her reminded him of the wild colts he'd tamed, frightened, fierce, unwilling to break. When they reached his ranch, night had fallen. The place stretched wide and still, the kind of silence only open land can keep. He helped her down from the wagon and led her toward a cabin whose lamplight spilled warmly through thin curtains. "You can rest here tonight," he said, opening the door to a small room. The bed was neatly made, the air faintly smelling of cedar and smoke. "Ain't much, but it'll do." She hesitated at the threshold, her eyes meeting his. "Why are you helping me?" Silas looked away, scratching the back of his neck. "Because someone should have." The words sank deep. She stepped inside. The floor creaked beneath her boots, a sound that felt strangely comforting. He lingered at the door, hat in hand, then nodded once and left her to the quiet. Later, Evelyn sat by the small window, watching the moon climb above the hills. The silver light touched her hair, turning it into a soft crown. Outside, she could hear the low murmur of Silas tending to his horses, the soft snort of the animals, the scrape of wood on earth. She thought of the train, the stairs, the voices that had called her cursed. Here, in this place of dust and silence, no one had looked away. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to breathe without hiding. When she lay down to rest, the night air was gentle, cool against her skin. From somewhere outside, a coyote called, distant and lonely. She closed her eyes, unaware that her story, and his, had just begun. And though she didn't yet know it, she had already changed something in him. Something long asleep had stirred, as if the land itself had taken a quiet breath and decided to listen again. Morning came slow to the ranch, spilling light through thin curtains and warming the wooden floor where Evelyn's shoes sat neatly side by side. She rose early, drawn by the quiet hum of work outside. From the porch she saw Silas in the corral, the breath of his horse rising in small clouds, his hands steady on the reins. He didn't notice her at first, but when he did, he tipped his hat with a faint, wordless smile, the kind that said he was glad she was there, though he'd never admit it aloud. In the days that followed, she found small ways to belong. She washed dishes, mended a torn shirt, gathered eggs with the gentle precision of someone who'd once known finer things but no longer needed them. Silas watched from a distance, quietly grateful for the sound of another's footsteps. It had been years since laughter had brushed these walls. Evelyn's voice, when she spoke, was soft and unsure, but when she hummed to herself while sweeping the porch, it steadied the place like a hymn. Yet the world beyond the ranch did not forget her. Word traveled fast in a small town hungry for gossip. The general store clerk mentioned it first, how a young woman with ghost-white hair had moved in with Silas Reed. The story twisted with every retelling, growing sharper, meaner. "Heard she bewitched him," someone said. "Heard he found her wandering after sundown, half crazy." By week's end, half the town believed her cursed and the other half believed him foolish. Evelyn felt it one morning in the way silence fell when she entered the store. The women by the flour sacks stopped talking. A man laughed under his breath. Her cheeks flushed, but she said nothing, gathering what she came for and paying with coins she'd earned sewing Silas's old shirts. On the way out, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the glass, hair glinting like moonlight, and for a moment she almost believed their cruelty again. Silas was waiting by the wagon when she returned. He could tell by her silence what had happened. "They talk," he said simply. "They always do," she replied, her voice brittle. He nodded, hands resting on the reins. "Let 'em. Talk's wind, it don't plant roots unless you let it." But that night, she stood by the window long after dark, watching her reflection fade into the glass. "I shouldn't stay," she whispered, though she didn't know who she was speaking to. "You've been kind. That's reason enough for people to hate me. Silas stepped into the doorway, arms crossed. You think I care what they say? You should. A man like you has his place in this town. You'll lose it for me. He walked closer, the lamplight carving the lines of his face. I lost my place a long time ago, he said quietly. I'm not looking to find it again. For a moment neither spoke. The distance between them felt charged, fragile as glass. He took a breath, voice low. If folks are gonna talk anyway, maybe we ought to give them something worth talking about. She looked up, puzzled. What do you mean? His gaze held hers. Act like you're mine. The words landed like thunder, not loud but deep. She blinked, uncertain if he meant it or if it was some shield against the town's cruelty. Pretend, she asked. If that's what you need to call it, he said, though something in his eyes betrayed more than practicality. The next morning, she found one of his late fiancée's dresses folded neatly on the chair, a soft cream gown, simple but graceful. She hesitated before putting it on. When she stepped outside, Silas stood waiting, coat dusted with sunlight, a quiet awe flickering across his face. They rode into town together, side by side, and though every eye turned toward them, she didn't lower her gaze. His hand brushed hers as they walked, a touch deliberate enough to be seen but gentle enough to feel true. In the bakery, an old woman who had once refused Evelyn's service offered her a smile. "Morning, Mrs. Reed," she said. The name startled her, but Silas didn't correct it. Evelyn thanked the woman softly, her voice steady despite the trembling in her chest. For the first time in years, she felt the warmth of belonging, borrowed, perhaps, but real enough to hold. By the time they left town, whispers followed them like a trail of smoke, but their cruelty had softened into curiosity. In the wagon, Evelyn finally exhaled, her shoulders shaking with laughter she hadn't known she could still feel. Silas glanced over, startled by the sound, and then joined her. For a few miles the world felt kind again. But kindness never went untested. That evening, as dusk settled, the echo of hooves broke the still air. 3 men rode up, ranch hands full of whiskey and cheap pride. They called out to Silas with mocking tones, words slurred but cruelly clear. "Reed, you keepin' that witch for luck or for company?" one jeered. Laughter followed, ugly and sharp. Evelyn stepped out onto the porch before Silas could stop her. The men fell silent for a beat, surprised by her calm. "You can call me what you please," she said, her voice low but unwavering. "But a curse doesn't stand beside a man, it's chased away. Maybe ask yourselves why I'm still here." Her words hit harder than gunfire. The leader spat into the dirt, muttered something coarse, and turned his horse. Within moments they were gone, swallowed by the dark. Silas lowered his rifle, though he'd never lifted it. "You didn't have to do that," he murmured. "Yes," she said softly, eyes fixed on the horizon. "I did." He stepped beside her, the quiet between them now heavy with something tender. "You're stronger than most men I know." She looked up, a small, genuine smile curving her lips. "Maybe I finally stopped trying to prove I'm not broken." The stars stretched wide above them, endless and still. He reached for her hand, rough fingers brushing her skin with reverence rather than need. "Then stay," he said. "Not as a guest. Not pretendin' it." Her breath caught. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." For a long moment she said nothing. Then, gently, she turned her hand in his until their fingers fit. The ranch was silent but for the wind moving through the grass, whispering like a blessing. Later that night, as the lamp burned low, Evelyn sat by the window once more. Her reflection stared back. Not a ghost, not a curse, but a woman remade by kindness. Somewhere beyond the hills, the town would still talk. Let them. The truth had taken root here, beneath a sky too vast for shame. And in that vastness, 2 lonely souls, one burdened by silence, the other by scorn, had found the courage to begin again.